Hi everybody, welcome to week 3 of class. In this week, we're going to take the information that we learned about ourselves last week through the learning patterns and add a layer on top of that. And that layer is called metacognition. Metacognition is a big word that just means that you have thought about and you understand how you approach your thought processes. So lots of times you hear thinking about thinking or wondering about how I do things. All of that is involved in the metacognition process. If you've read your text or if you've read the interactive graphic at the top of our discussion for the week, you'll know that metacognition has a series of 7 steps. And some of us do all 7 steps, some of us skip some steps, some of us do the steps, but we're better at them than we are at other steps. So I think we can all probably pick one of our favorite steps after you've looked at all 7, and you can probably pick one that you may do but aren't comfortable with, or that you may think, oh, I do not do that at all. So let's really briefly walk through the 7 steps. So the first step is mulling, and I always equate mulling to a person who is comfortable using sequence, because mulling asks you to say to yourself, what am I supposed to be doing here? And a lot of times, what am I supposed to be doing involves reading the instructions or reading the directions on how to put together something, or the instructions for a paper or the instructions for the assignment. It's really considering, what is it that I am supposed to do here? So people who are tied to sequence, who use as needed or are use first in sequence, really like to have that set of instructions, really like to know what it is that they're supposed to be doing. The second step of mulling is connecting, and connecting asks you to ask yourself, have I done this before? And for me, I am not particularly a strong sequence user. I use it as needed, but my other patterns are so much stronger that if you were to follow me around, you would be like, she does not use sequence at all. I am much more attuned to precision and technical reasoning and confluence. So when I think of connecting, I think that's me. So if somebody asks me a question, or if I'm working on a project, the very first thing that goes through my mind is, sometimes unfortunately not to read the instructions, but have I done this before? Hey, if I've done this before, did it work out for me? Is there something I can use from that experience that'll fit in nicely with this experience? Step 3 in metacognition is rehearsing, and rehearsing is, do I need to practice this? So this would appeal to precision learners, it would appeal to sequence learners, technical reasoning and confluence probably not so much, but do I need to practice this? It's not like we're going to play a tennis game so we practice up, or basketball so we shoot baskets, but do I need to practice this would be something like, I need to take the quiz for the class. Should I read the textbook and answer the questions at the end to check my understanding of the material before I take the test? So that's rehearsing, just a little bit of practice. Should I write a draft of my discussion before I post it? That's the rehearsing stage. The attending stage is, how can I pace myself through the task? So I think about it sort of as class. So we have 5 weeks of class. Lots of people are so gung-ho at the beginning. Yay, I posted on the very first day. I posted before class started. I took all my quizzes. But by week 3, they are tired and they're like, I'm not sure I'm going to make it here. So the idea of attending is the idea of saying, okay, what is this task that I have to complete? How can I pace myself throughout the course of the task so that I get it done in the best way that I can without getting tired and without starting to skip things? Expressing is step 5 in metacognition, and it's the actual act of doing whatever it is we're going to do. So it's the act of posting your discussion. It's the act of writing and submitting an assignment. The next step is assessing, and assessing is sort of right as you're coming off the actual activity, you think to yourself, did I put forth the effort that I should have in this? So if I write a paper for class and I don't get to it till the very day it's due, and it's late in the day, and I have an hour to write a 4-page paper, am I going to put forth the effort needed? No, not if I'm not starting it till the day it's due. So that's sort of just a brief, did I put forth the effort that I should have to get the grade I wanted, or to get the result that I wanted from a task? Step 7 is reflecting, and that is, what did I do and what didn't I do? So if I'm thinking about my example of writing a paper, maybe I read the chapter and watched the videos, and maybe I looked it up on the Google or Ashford Library to say, what exactly is the material here that I need to learn? Well, good for me. That's what I should have done. What didn't I do? Well, I didn't start till 2 hours before the paper was due. Not so good. So that's the idea of reflecting. And the last step is revisiting, and revisiting says, what am I going to do differently next time? So I'll use my paper example again. Maybe when I'm revisiting that particular assignment, I think, I'm going to start on Friday instead of Monday night. And even if I don't do much on Friday, maybe I read half the text, or maybe I just read the instructions for the assignment. That's still more than I did the previous time. So as we look at the steps of metacognition, we can sort of map on to our learning patterns. And so we talked about mulling, how that's attractive to sequence and some precision learners. Connecting is really a step in the process that is attractive to confluent learners and some technical reasoners. Rehearsing is very important to those who really enjoy the precision pattern, because you want to get it right. So in order to get it right, you're going to practice it before you submit it, or you might revise your paper, or you might think about, did I get everything that I needed to get done? So attending, I think we can all work on that, and that helps you pace yourself through the course of the activities that you're doing. Expressing, we all have to express, because remember, express is the actual act of doing the activity that you're working on. Assessing is really for confluent learners are pretty good at assessing because they like to look at the big picture. Reflecting also is another one where confluent learners sort of thrive here, because it's the idea of, oh, what could I have done differently? And confluent learners really like to do things their own way. So they like to think about different things, ways they can do various tasks in a variety of different ways. And revisiting is also another step that I think is probably difficult for people, because it makes you think about the next activity. So you can't just leave the past in the past and move on to the future. You have to kind of think about, what kind of mistakes did I make, and what should I do differently if I want a different outcome? In your discussion for this week, you're going to think about all of those steps of metacognition and how they relate to your own personal use of the patterns. And think about, one, the step you use, and it could be more than one, step you use with ease, the step that you do use but you find it a real challenge, and then the step that you completely skip. And I'll share mine so that you have sort of an example to go on. The step I use with ease is without a doubt connecting. Like I mentioned before, if somebody asks me a question or I get a project, I don't think, oh, I better read the instructions for this. I say, what, have I done this before? Hey, can I pull in this information from last time? Hey, can I reuse that project that I worked 100 hours on? I'm always trying to make these small connections between different things. So I use that step without even thinking. A step that I use, but that I find it challenging, and by challenging, not necessarily hard, but it's a little uncomfortable for me. And that would probably be step 6, 7, or 8, that last step where you're doing your actual learning. And that's because it forces me to look critically at myself. And nobody wants to be critical of themselves, even though I think most people are the most critical of themselves. It's hard for me to say, no, really, you screwed that up. You cannot do that the next time. But yet it's an important part of the process, and really where a lot of the learning takes place. So I do it, but it's uncomfortable for me, and I would consider that a challenge. The step that I completely skip, unless forced to, is absolutely mulling. I am the last person to read a set of instructions, which I maybe shouldn't admit to publicly, but yet here I am. It's one of those things that it just never occurs to me to read the instructions first. And I generally, if we're talking about my personal life, so I'm putting together a bookshelf, I kid you not, 9 out of 10 times I will put it together wrong the first time. And it never occurs to me on the 10th time to, get out the instructions and read them first. I just continue to do what I do. Because at work I am required by law to do things in a certain way, that's the one time that I'll use mulling, and it is uncomfortable. But I do that because I only have a certain number of hours in a day and I gotta get a lot of stuff done. So I will use mulling then, but very rarely. I will almost always go to connecting, and then off on I go to through the other steps of metacognition. It's only really in that reflecting and revisiting step that I go, you better read the instructions before you push send on that. So that in a nutshell, and 10 minutes, is what we think of when we think of the steps of metacognition. So I'm so looking forward to seeing what you think about your pattern use and your use of the steps of metacognition, and I hope everybody has a great week. Thanks, everyone.